Has your network been breached? Cybereason can help you answer this question. Cybereason products hunt for threats within your network and eliminate them in real time. To Cybereason, real time means within seconds. Founded by former military hackers who don't play by the rules, they've built this experience into their platform. Harness ingenuity and imagination, not just code, to defeat attackers. Cybereason, disrupt the adversary and let the hunt begin. Logarithm's Netmon Freemium delivers real-time network visibility to quickly identify emerging threats in your IT environment. Netmon Freemium is a free commercial-grade network forensics and traffic analytics solution. You can use Netmon Freemium's powerful capabilities to search against all observed network traffic, identify abnormal traffic patterns and application usage, and quickly analyze full packet captures. Take the first step towards real-time network visibility. Visit logarithm.com/freemium to learn more and download it today. Endgame automates the hunt for both known and never-before-seen adversaries in enterprise networks. Built on unique knowledge on the adversary's tools, techniques, and tactics, Endgame's centrally managed agent prevents, detects, and responds to advanced adversaries in the earliest stages of the kill chain without prior knowledge. Endgame, automate the hunt. IT Pro TV, an easy, entertaining approach to online IT training. Stream over 2,000 hours of up-to-date, high-quality video content live and on demand. Premium annual memberships include all video content as well as access to virtual labs and the Q&A forums. You'd pay $85.70 a month or $857 per year, but we have a special offer for our listeners. For a free 7-day trial and 30% off the lifetime of your active subscription, visit itpro.tv/Security Weekly and use the discount code SW30. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. If you've ever wanted to hang out in Deadwood, South Dakota, and hang out with all of us and go to a really cool hacker conference, I don't know what's more resounding endorsement than visiting a super cool place. Come and hang out with us because we want to hang out with you and talk security. There's training. There's a conference. It's in October 25th through the 28th. It's wildwesthackinfest.com, HACKINfest.com. Make sure you go check that out. Buy your tickets today. It's going to be a lot of fun. I hope to see you there. Now, what do I want to say? Oh, here with us still is Doug White, Carlos Perez from Security Weekly. Don Pizzette from IT Pro TV has stuck around to talk about security news. I want to lead in with a not really security-related story, but it was Amazon Prime Day earlier this week. I'm a pretty big Amazon shopper. I have my things I don't like about Amazon. Primarily for me, for the shopping experience, there's two things. I don't like that you can't pick how your stuff is shipped, and I don't like Amazon Business. I think it's a flaming turd of a product that they need to make better. I mean, you made AWS, but you can't make an Amazon Business that actually works well. And I know my employees are laughing because we've all tried to make it work, and we can't really make it work to make it do what we want to do. So having said that, I'm still a big Amazon shopper. The third thing I don't like about Amazon is a lot of times you see stuff on Amazon, and it's a higher price than you can find at other places on the web. Now, we do have Prime, so we save money on shipping, and I experienced that, and you really have to take your savings in shipping and apply that, and if you're placing a large order, we just ordered from Monoprice. I'm sure a lot of us have shopped at Monoprice and ordered a bunch of cables and stuff. They're so much cheaper that even if we do have to pay shipping and it comes from Canada and we have to wait, it's fine because we still come out ahead. And I like the selection for certain. If you could, like, we ordered a ton of patch cables and drops.
If I'm buying cables, I buy them on Monoprice.
Like 1,000 feet of cable.
I'm addicted to Amazon. I mean,
I am too. Right,
and which is what Amazon wants. And
and I'll put those caveats on it. Now, go ahead.
It's a low friction.
Yes,
that's all.
You're absolutely right, Carlos. It is. I get sucked into the easy button for shopping, and I'm all on board on the Amazon Echo platform. However, Prime Day is I've ordered some really cool stuff on Prime Day. A lot of times the stuff I'm interested in doesn't really go on sale, but I end up finding some cool stuff. And my wife and I will go back and forth on Prime Day and talk about, like, well, what do we need? What's on sale? What's happening? And I sent her a link, and I'm like, we absolutely need this. We must have it. And it was a pair of $400 night vision goggles, like the ones that flip. like up and down. She had a really good sense of humor about it. She was like, LOL. I didn't end up ordering them, actually, because it got bad reviews. As much as you trust or not trust the Amazon reviews, it actually got some bad reviews about working effectively outside. And I really wanted it so I could walk in my neighbor's yards at night and still see it.
But it's like a lot of stuff. If you look at something that's got more than 100 reviews, it's like your Uber driver.
Yes.
You got more than 100 reviews and it's less than 4 stars. I'm sorry, guys, but I'm laying off that.
Right.
Hey, even if it is night vision goggles, I mean, we all want them, but even if it is night vision goggles, I'm laying off of it if it's got more than 100 reviews and it's got less than 4 stars. Because now, I mean, I know there's always sour grapes, but boy, oh boy.
Now, the one thing I did miss security related was YubiKeys.
Yeah.
YubiKey 4 were on sale for 50% off.
Yes, they were.
I already have like 3 of them, and I don't want to really activate more than what I have.
Yeah.
So.
Well, if you have, I actually wanted one, so I got one of those, and I got some Hues because I wanted some Hue bulbs they had that were like 40% off or something like that.
See, I missed that too because I could have used some Hue bulbs.
Yeah, they had a collection. They had an Echo Dot that we got. So
the regular Echo was on sale for like 52% off.
Yeah,
I ordered one of those, and I actually last night decided I would give it to my 9-year-old son.
Okay. Well, yeah, this was for my daughter because she's been wanting to put Hue bulbs in her room, and I was like, okay, we're going to do this. It's like Prime Day. When else are you going to get this stuff? So I got Hue bulbs and an Echo so that she could put that in her room, and I was like, now you can walk in and go, oh, I want the room to be Dawn or whatever it is. Russ has his whole office. You can walk in Russ's office and go, hi, Dawn, and it like turns into some kind of elaborate display. So
it's awesome. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, they are.
The YubiKeys are good. Now, Donnie, you're a YubiKey user?
Oh, yeah, I love them. I have a YubiKey Neo that I always carry with me, and then I have just a backup of the regular YubiKey 4. I think they're great.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I like them a lot. I think it provide for the price and the little effort it takes to set them up.
Yep.
I think it provides an extra level of security that is good.
I really recommend them. I mean, I recommend them to everybody because it's not the end all, but it's certainly another step in the right direction.
It's better than getting texted a code every time you try and log in a site. You plug in your secure key and you tap the button.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
and if someone steals my phone, they don't have my YubiKey.
Yeah, and I think there's some derivative of that's the future. I mean, that's somewhere.
I wish like Twitter would support. Yeah. Twitter only supports the SMS code that you mentioned, Don.
Yeah. Only SMS, yeah.
Yeah, which is kind of sad. I found an interesting article from Bruce Schneier on his blog about tomato plant security, which I thought was kind of fodder for maybe an interesting discussion. He says that it's common for caterpillars to eat each other when they're stressed out by the lack of food. And so when you're growing tomato plants, they actually have something that they do that causes the caterpillars to eat each other. My only thought on that is, like, could we do that with malicious attackers? Could we make them attack each other rather than attack us?
Isn't that just a honeypot kind of approach?
Yeah,
which is
sort
just
of.
Give them something to attack or redirect them at some other attacker. I mean, I think we do that already to some degree. But yeah, it's a good idea. It's kind of scary because that's when that DNA genetic code gets loose in the world, and we all of a sudden that's where the zombie apocalypse comes from. Larry's prepared, but that actually is the DNA virus that gets loose and causes us to all want to eat each other. So
it's true.
When you find me in the parking lot gnawing on Paul's leg or vice versa, probably he'd win. But
I have a lot of ammunition at home.
Yeah,
so.
I have a lot of ammunition too, but he's had like martial arts training, and I'm like a sloth, so I think in that apocalypse scenario, I just kind of lay down and die. I'm like, this is too much trouble. Just eat me, for God's sake.
I can just run faster than you. That's really what.
Well, that's
matters.
Probably true too. Yeah, he can do a lot of things I can't do.
I don't know if there's a good parallel, and I want to hear from our cast and crew that's on today. There's a good parallel to turning attackers on each other. I think it's kind of like an interesting kind of discussion, but I also think it's similar to talking about like who would win in a fight, a ninja robot or a dinosaur kind of thing. Like,
there's a liability issue there too. I know that just the other day I was actually talking to some members of Congress. I just happened to have some members of Congress handy, and I was talking to them. And one of the things we were talking about was vigilantism. And one of the things.
Well, this isn't attacking other. So don't mistake it. I'm not talking about attack like the defender attacking the attacker. I'm talking about doing something that triggers the attackers to attack each other.
Well, no, I know, but I mean, all that ties back into vigilantism. Anytime,
No, but it's different.
Well, I know it is, but it's some of it's liability because anytime your organization, enterprise, or whatever starts causing things to happen, it's kind of in that realm. I mean, it's not the exact same thing.
Because I'd have to do something to cause
it's not
attackers.
me hacking you back, which is what they were talking about.
Something,
but it's still a redirection of an attack that what if it goes wrong? So your enterprise sets this up, you trigger the zombie apocalypse virtual equivalent, and
instead of attackers eating each other, they're eating other
organizations. The attacker goes to IBM instead,
Yeah.
and they take them on, and then suddenly IBM's attorneys are calling you going, we just suffered vast fiduciary harm because of your what you did.
You love that term, fiduciary.
I love it, man. It's the only term I like more than that is quantum entropy. I mean, quantum entropy is just my favorite. I mean, that was the best thing.
Quantum, I mean, you could really put that word quantum in front of really anything, and it becomes sexy for us nerds. It really does. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, quantum pizza delivery.
That's right.
Coming to a store near you.
Look, I want to talk a little bit about data exposed in the cloud. Verizon was, of course, hit with, 14 million records that were leaked online. Yep. Essentially, what I gathered from all these articles that the root of this comes down to an S3 data repository that enabled public access. Mm-hmm. And Carlos is laughing, but this is an attack trend that we've seen. We talked about a lot of similar attacks.
I wouldn't call it an attack trend. I would call it lack of knowledge of the admin of how AWS work.
Yeah, I think so.
You can actually register, for example, if you register, let's say, an S3 bucket and you register it to a domain, and then you say, okay, I'm not going to use this anymore, you can actually just take over that bucket. You did register the domain, but the pointer record is still there. This dangling domain that it's left in AWS, and you just redirect it to your own bucket, and all of a sudden now you have your own phishing URL for all of your malware in your S3 bucket for Verizon.com. And that's something that when you look at how AWS recommends for you to patch stuff, it's quite a large document. I think it's over 1,000 pages of all of the different settings that you can have in your AWS domain and settings for your buckets and how to access that data. And the problem is that you have to be very careful. You have to read very carefully the documentation. You have to test because many times just people say, okay, I'm deregistering the domain, and they leave the bucket. Or they change something in the profile, and the bucket now becomes exposed. It is a configuration error. It's an operational error. And the bucket gets exposed, and people can then rummage through it.
A lot of people are speculating that we're going to see a lot more of this type of exposure, Carlos, and I agree due to the complexity. I think until people get a handle on it, which could be a really long time, this is going to be commonplace. Don, do you have comments or feedback on this particular scenario?
I think Carlos hit the nail on the head. It's really just lack of knowledge, right? And the barrier for entry to cloud computing has kind of gotten really low. I remember when AWS first came out, and there was no graphical user interface for it. You had to do everything through the CLI and through the API. So working with S3 buckets was hard, and you had to know what you were doing. Well, now they have a web interface, and you can go and you can quickly spin these things up. Anybody can stumble their way through the GUI and create an S3 bucket, throw data in there, and not think about security or think dumb things like, oh, I don't have to secure this because nobody's gonna know it's there, right? I'll give it some random name. Well, and people find it. It turns up, it gets left behind, it gets forgotten, and the data is there. It's just too easy to get into that without like passing a basic driver's test to say I know how to drive the cloud.
Well, one of my favorites was AWS. This happened to, let's say, Bob a couple of months ago. Bob gets called very late at night that somebody got into a virtual machine in AWS, and they need his help. And Bob goes in and he asks, okay, can you show me the logins? Can you show me all of the logs for this VPS? Oh, we never thought about that. And by default, when you configure AWS, all of that login is not there. You need to actually go in and enable it all. And then all of that login is per region. So that means that if I decide to mess up with your account and I'm able to go into another region to access your stuff and you only have logs set up in one region, you're not going to see what I'm doing. So it is that problem. It's lack of knowledge. People assume a lot of stuff, and they say, "Oh no, it's shiny, it's new. We're going to use it." Kubernetes. Oh, Kubernetes sexy. Google uses it for its containers. Well, have you configured your profiles and the permissions, and are you getting all of those logs that you should be getting from the get-go before it blows up in your face that somebody was able to Trojan one of your accounts or groups to then control your infrastructure? You need to have that knowledge previous of hand. You have to have proper planning.
It's really scary to think about what Carlos and Don were just mentioning about how when technology first kind of hits the market, that it takes a lot of research and understanding. Inherently from that, you end up with a more proper configuration, largely because stuff doesn't work and it's not documented, so you got to go figure it out, and you can figure it well. And as it grows in the market, it becomes more accessible and almost makes it easier for people to make those mistakes and use the technology. Then I feel like on the kind of opposite end of the bell curve, we realize how bad that is, and we make it easier for people to create good configurations. Now, with PHP, we're still at the top of the bell curve, right? With a lot of technologies. Yeah. But I feel like, Docker and Kubernetes and AWS are different points of that bell curve depending on what technology.
And don't forget one critical thing. There's this downward pressure from management when there are buzzwordy, popular things like the cloud. And when the CEO walks in, and I've been sitting in the room when it happened, the CEO walks in and says, my yacht was broken. I decided to come into the office today. Why aren't we using the cloud? Get us on the cloud and get us on the cloud today. And a lot of people who are networking people or IT people, your job, people out there watching, your job is to keep the lights on. It's to get things working. And a lot of times because of the old-fashioned mindset, the same thing with coding or anything else, the old-fashioned mindset was fix it. And we don't often stop and take time and go into a development cycle or an assessment cycle and say, how's the best way to fix it? It's like, roll it up here. So like Don said, now there's a nice web-based interface. Click here, and you're up and running. And people start migrating real quickly like that, and they don't think about these things because they go, look how easy this is. Click, 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 and then boom, they're up and running.
What are defaults that all of that stuff is running? One of my favorite books is the Phoenix Project. I don't know if you guys have read it.
Yes.
But one of the things I like is that at the end, you see the crazy security guy actually learns all of his lessons, and he's actually part of the process.
Yeah. And
many organizations actually, because security probably was a showstopper or they had their own crazy security guy, they see security as an impedance. They should be part of that process. Like, hey, we're going to implement cloud. You should have somebody actually, your team probably doesn't have the time to go through all of the documentation to look at all of the possibilities. Well, you have your security guys. Have it red team it.
Yeah. Well, this is what we were advocating, Carlos, even back in the code development days, was that there be a security person on a team, and ideally, I 100% agree with you. Ideally, that is exactly the situation where there is a Carlos sitting there at the table while we develop this. The problem is a lot of companies don't take the time, and when you go to management and you say, I want to hire Carlos to sit at the table, management goes, that's just an added function, a cost drain. We're not going to do it. Handle it, guys. It's what I pay you for. And that's where the problem starts. So I completely agree with you.
And that's an operational problem and political problem. And that's why we're now seeing, for example, on the development side, we're looking at Verico, we're looking at other companies that actually are injecting their products into the process itself. In the case of AWS, you need to start either learning to script or learning how to code against it, or buy a product that will actually audit your AWS settings, or probably like Paul is doing, he's learning Ansible. If you learn Ansible, you learn Puppet, Chef, or any of the configuration management products. Their advantage is that you can say, this settings can never be turned off. These settings should always be applied to this object in my cloud, and it will go and make sure that it's set up that way. And if it isn't there, it will alert you, and you can actually have it automatically reset that to the proper way.
But I think along with what Carlos says, and this is really like one of my major focuses today, is learning things like Docker, learning things like Ansible and Puppet and Chef, and looking at that and drawing on my security experience. What I'm gaining from that is if we as a security community embrace these technologies and understand what developers and sysadmins are going through today, I look at it as a huge opportunity, because the ability and the controls that you have over systems and their configuration today are unprecedented. And as a security person, to understand that and say, well, look, you can make basically containers, virtual systems, applications, you can make them look however you want. As security people, we need to understand that process and say, hey, when you go build stuff and when you go push a configuration out, like, here's the secure configuration. I feel like we have the security knowledge. Yeah. The sysadmins and developers know how to build all that stuff. If we just get together and hang out and learn all these new technologies together, and I feel like as security, I truly believe that we're kind of behind the curve today. A lot of us are like, well, I haven't really touched Docker, but understanding it allows you to make those recommendations to say, oh yeah, by the way, when you build your containers, like, take all this stuff in your configuration. And it's not just, it's a security conversation, but it's also, by the way, your system will be more resilient.
But what's going to put you at that table is insurance. When the actuarials get a hold of it and they say, here's what you're going to have to do in order to have your cyber insurance, you've got to have Paul or Carlos sitting at the table.
Right.
That's when Paul and Carlos will be sitting at the table, because too many firms have that fight and they're saying, just do it. I'm paying you for it. And I'm like, I got to get the lights on. And I've been there before.
And in fact, Paul, if we want to learn from people who have actually done it, we can just look at the NSA. The NSA has SIMP, something that they made open source and public, which is a solution that I think plugs into Puppet and already has a bunch of pre-configured modes of making sure that your infrastructure is properly configured and properly hardened. And it works super, but the problem is that you need to run it against CentOS. They wrote it for their internal systems, and they made it open source. But the advantage is that now you have a framework that you can go in and modify and start applying there. I think it's simp-project.com. I think it's the page. I could be wrong. I simply was talking with somebody that worked there, and he told me about it and says, "Oh, and that was open source when I was over there, and you can go in and try." I'm like, "Oh, awesome. I need to try that." And it's in my list of to-dos to play with.
Along the lines of this conversation, one of the great discussions that I had was actually of Farah Mevatuna from NetSparker. We're talking about enabling developers to do security. And this story came about where Samsung's Tizen operating system, they ran basically a source code analysis tool against it and found 27,000 programming errors. Now, our reaction, and my first reaction, of course, as a security person, is like, wow, that operating system is a flaming piece of crap. However, if you take into account, like, why this stuff, and you may be wondering, like, well, why hasn't Samsung run this kind of tool against their system and just fixed all of these issues? I really think, in Samsung's defense, actually, and believe me, I'd love to point out an embedded operating system that had tons of vulnerabilities. And I'm not discounting that this embedded OS it doesn't have vulnerabilities. Like, it probably does, and that's fine. 27,000 is a really high number. What I likened it to was one of my first jobs ever in information technology. And I, not knowing it at the time, but looking back on it now, I was observing the interaction between development and QA. If the QA department was really new and didn't understand the application, they would report back a bunch of bugs, and developers would be like, well, that's not a bug. They're like, we designed and we wrote the system. They're like, that's not a bug. Like, QA doesn't know what it's talking. Like, we're going to push this next release, and we're just going to push back on all these tickets because we have such a low confidence. And that's what I truly believe is one of the problems we have in this industry today is if you read this article, Samsung representatives actually talk about that. They're like, Well, a lot of these static analysis tools, they have so many false positives. They're like, well, sure, they're going to find 27,000, but they're like, how many of those 27,000 are actual problems? And it comes down to the developers having faith in what's being reported to them, not just in functional testing, but in security testing as well. If we can improve upon and build that faith, we're all going to be in much better shape security-wise.
Yeah, and this is something I know I sound like a broken record, but we're going back to spending the money into the knowledge of your people and also fixing your processes. If you have hot washes or after action reports or however you want to call it, like, hey, we went through this process, we went through this entire sprint, QA went through all of our code, this is what they found. Their automated QA tools found this stuff. How many of this stuff is broken? Okay, then what you do is that in your next Scrum or planning session, you plan how are we going to modify the tool? Do you have the skill set to modify the tool, to modify that rule set, to fix it, to reduce those false positives? Now you go through another sprint, and now you have even less false positives. And then you do another hot wash, or you do another after action, or you do another Scrum, or you do another review, and you go like, okay, now how do we fix this? And you make sure that people are held accountable and that everything's documented. And you add the KPIs, the key performance indicators. Hey, how many false positives have we from one sprint to the other? And are we bringing those numbers down? Yes, no. And once you're measuring people against it, believe me, they'll start fixing it.
And that is dev prod. So forever in development, when we worked in the mainframe, we had dev prod.
Did you have like punch cards and stuff?
No, we had coal-fired computers and pull starters. So it's like I had a pull start hard drive.
Like QA were the people that ran your punch cards through the system, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like
they were turning the cranks on the punch card.
But dev prod was that person. So there was a person sitting there who signs off on that movement that Carlos was talking about. Yeah. So when I take that from dev to prod, there's a person who's this gatekeeper who says, I know the developers are giving me grief about this. I know management's giving me grief about this. But until those QA people are satisfied at whatever threshold we set, we don't sign this and it doesn't become a prod. And if you've got that control in place, and you need that, that is in COBIT. So if you go back to COBIT and you look at what COBIT says, that is a requirement. So if you're under... Is
that like COBOL?
No. All right, I'm leaving. That's it. I'm out. Mike, no, I'm done. That's it. No, not COBOL. It's Fortran 2, baby. Electric Boogaloo. But that prod dev person is handling that. And when they manage that process, they are the ones that sign off on that and then say, yes, let's move on. And that's what Carlos is talking about.
Yeah. Or COBOL. And that's the thing. It's that many times as technologists, we want a piece of technology that's going to fix it. And many times we're a bit naive and we want a technology that will do it 100% perfect. And that doesn't exist. We need to accept that technology is not going to fix it. We need to have people to learn to do stuff. We need it's like the other day I was talking with a friend who bought Security Center, and he was telling me, and he was saying, oh, dude, it took me 3 freaking weeks to get Security Center up and running. And we're like, did you read the manual? No, I know my stuff. I know how to set up software. I'm setting up. I go like, yeah, but did you read the manual? No, I know how to set up software. I go like, okay, did you bought the training? No, that was a bit extra. How much? Only like 5% of the total price. Like, come on, 5%. So people keep going like, oh, this is technology. We want to implement it. It's going to fix itself. It's going to install itself. It doesn't work that way. You need to invest in knowledge. You need to invest in knowing how stuff works.
Oh, and to speak to that, Carlos, Apollo pointed me to a thread where people were asked to describe Docker in a sentence in a tweet, and the responses are absolutely hilarious. And I forget exactly what one person was saying, but they were like kind of down on Docker. And actually someone who works for Docker kind of responded to them and was like, no, that's not really how it works. And they're like, well, when I did it, that was my result. And the person from Docker was like, well, here in the manual, like it tells you how to do that. And like very politely, this person from Docker on Twitter, who like I truly admire now, basically told them to RTFM in like the nicest way possible. Because I'm like, dude, if you're going to go like put that out on social media, like clearly you haven't read the freaking manual. You should go read that. And when you're dealing with something as complex as Docker, or anything like Carlos is saying, like or Security Center, right? Like you got to read the manual and understand it before you can make these claims that it doesn't work the way you want or doesn't do what you want it to do. Like, no, dude, like you haven't read the manual. And I forget who it was. I retweeted the thread, so you can go dig up my Twitter feed.
You can see it.
You can see it out there, and you totally get to the point. You're like, well, that's what Paul's talking about. Like that lady from Docker, I forget her. I should have brought up her name because she deserves an award. Like the most polite, polite way to say RTFM, like I've seen in a really long time. It was
very
awesome.
subtle, but it got the point across.
Jess Friend, I think is her name. She works at Google. She used to work at Docker, and now she works at Google in charge of security for Docker. I think it is.
I was like, we need to get her on as a guest.
Yeah,
I'm going to go back and think it. We need to have her on as a guest. And we have one of the security leads at Docker who's also interested in coming on one of our shows.
Jessie
as well.
Frassell.
Yes, that was her name,
That's
Jessie.
Yeah,
yes.
it had to be her. When you mentioned it was the lady and she knew Docker, I want like the top expert here, and she's nice, cool. Jessie Frassell.
Yeah,
I think she works in Google now with the Kubernetes team in charge of all of that stuff.
She's awesome. She's got my like A for the week on social media and putting people in their place. It was fantastic. So some things are happening with respects to Microsoft protocols as well as Samba. So Samba put out a new security update to address the exploit that fueled WannaCry. I feel like they're kind of late to the party on that. But there were some other fixes in there too. Carlos, Don, or Doug, did you guys follow what Samba was putting out this week?
I know that Samba put out one about Kerberos, but not WannaCry. That's new to me.
Yeah, it was supposed to be like they had already pushed a patch out, and it fixed it mostly, but then they had to do a second round to shore it all up. So they had kind of already taken steps. So that was my understanding.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that Samba, they put out one that it had to do with the KDC, PM, KDC, I'm forgetting the acronym. It had to do with the encryption of the ticket. When I request a ticket, the ticket needs to be encrypted. And the piece of code that handled that encryption wasn't handled correctly. So you were able to kind of get clear text. So it was a problem. But the problem is that you have to configure Kerberos, Samba as a domain controller, and also work with Kerberos instead of NTLM. And once you were able to do the attack, you were able to then do kind of like a DC sync and sync the entire database out of your other domain controller or a Windows domain controller, and you were able to get all of the passwords. But that very few companies have that mix of Windows domain controllers and Samba domain controllers.
I see. So you had to have a Samba domain controller configured with Kerberos.
Yep.
Yeah, and also you need to configure Kerberos. Kerberos is, when I want to punish one of my guys, I'll give him a vulnerability on Kerberos.
Oh my God, dude, Kerberos is like unbelievably complicated, and it's interesting how we're still to this day talking about Kerberos vulnerabilities. When I started actually working for the university in 2001, our single sign-on custom rolled solution relied upon Kerberos, and it was really interesting. And a lot of universities at the time and previous to that used MIT, because Kerberos came from MIT, right?
Came from MIT.
And it's been around for a really long time.
And then Microsoft modified it.
And so, Microsoft's version has its own probably good things, but probably also because MIT's Kerberos was kind of wonky too.
I mean, Kerberos has been around since the 90s. I mean, this is an ancient piece of software, protocol, and I may have been around before that. But I mean, that we were seeing like enterprises even that were using it just in very limited ways to authenticate I saw it being used to authenticate terminals that were connecting remotely over like POTS and dial-up and all kinds of stuff that were just using Kerberos.
And for Kerberos configuration, you're going to see three main errors that people make. Number one, time sync. Everything has to be synchronized.
Yes.
Number two, everything has to be FQDNs. No fucking IPs, FQDNs. you use an IP and then you're going, oh, but it's using NTLM. Fuck you. It had to be FQDNs. And then you have the third one, which is SPNs. You need your service principal names set up properly. Like this service requires Kerberos. Because if the SPN is not properly set, it's going to go NTLM, or it's going to use any other protocol. It's going to negotiate whatever it wants. But if you tell it the SPN is, I think in the case of Windows, you have host. Host is kind of like alias for a bunch of other services, including CIF and some others. But you have SPN for RDP. You have SPN for SMTP, POP, SSH. You have your service principal name. And if that's not properly configured, it's not going to work. So there's little minutiae that you have to be careful
and
with.
It's embedded in everything. So there's tons of stuff where it's embedded. I mean, the first time I saw it being used embedded was like in these dongles. So we had these dongles that you had to actually bring into the physical location every so many days, and they use Kerberos as a back end. So that thing is embedded in so much stuff.
See, I thought when I saw Kerberos way back when, I'm like, certainly something's going to come along, and I'm not going to have to worry about this. But here we are today in 2017 talking about Kerberos. Don, do you have Kerberos stories to share? I want to hear your experience. I know being in technology, as long as you must have come up on Kerberos at some point.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in the Mac world, right? So if you have Mac clients, you can connect them to an Active Directory, and it's using Kerberos, right? Because under the hood, a Mac is running BSD, so it's all natively supported right in there. And the problem is you've got where Apple doesn't really care all that much about it, but it's there, and they do just enough to maintain that support, and it makes it really easy to mess it up. And the problem I run into the most there is with SMB, Microsoft, to my knowledge, they don't really license out SMB to anybody, but plenty of people reverse engineer it.
Yeah.
And so you have things like Macs where they'll do SMB version 1, 2, and 3, but now your Windows machines are all at SMB version 4. So you get these new security features, and they don't take advantage of it. So now you've really got this challenge, and that's what the Samba team is up against. Is they're trying to reverse engineer SMB and trying to stay up to date, and it's kind of a losing battle.
As somebody who has ran two projects, one was SMB v2 implementation in NASL, and the other was SMB v3 in NASL. Microsoft puts out the document. The document's out there, and it has the entire packet structure and how are you supposed to configure it. The problem is that it is a pain to configure. When you look at SMB, you have actually two families. You have SMB v1. It has its own DLL. It has its own driver. Microsoft decided we don't want this anymore. We're going to come up with SMBv2. Where, in fact, Microsoft even did a bunch of hardening. When you look at all of the CVEs and vulnerabilities, you're going to see that almost all of that are for the old code, SMBv1, because SMBv1 was NetBIOS, NetPC, and a bunch of other protocols or all protocols bunched together, and it's a total mess. SMBv2, they actually improved it, and SMBv3 is actually SMBv2 with some additional extensions. Those additional extensions actually provide you with encryption.
I was going to say encryption is the big feature in V3, right?
Yeah, and Microsoft simply decided we added enough features to this that we're actually going to call it a brand new version, SMBv3. But it's still in the same DLL, and the only difference is a couple of extensions. But the problem is that many people were going like, hey, it worked. SMBv1 is accepted by everybody. It works. Why should we remove it? Well, here came WannaCry. Here came all of the exploits from the NSA. And now all of the infrastructures are going like, okay, we're killing SMBv1. And Sophos Appliance doesn't work. Oh, and my NetApp doesn't work because it was always using v1. Shit. Oh, and even worse, NetApp actually, I think, has a service account that never expires, and it's domain admin. And And SMB
it's almost like history repeating itself from Heartbleed, right? When the Heartbleed exploit came out and people said, "Oh, we got to start shutting off these old versions of SSL, and we got to shut off TLS version 1," and things started breaking, right? But at least people were finally turning the stuff off and doing something about it. You'd think we'd learn as a community and say, all right, let's start identifying places we still support old code that we don't.
And
really
Microsoft came out a long time before the WannaCry was released and said, was it, Carlos, and we did this, you weren't on the show that episode, I, in the interest of the security community, encourage everyone to disable SMB v1 in a technical segment, and it was like Microsoft came out a long time ago. Was it as early as last year? Was it like almost a year ago? The guy who published a blog post on MSDN and said, yeah, I was like the person responsible for designing it and maintaining it, and he's like, you don't want to run V1 anymore. Like, please.
A year,
What was his name? Carlos probably remembers.
NetPile.
Yeah.
NetPile is the program manager for SMB at Microsoft.
He pleaded with the Microsoft community and said, please, and now clearly it was like a voice in the wilderness. No one conceivably was listening and disabled it.
But I mean, that's the problem with embedded applications and embedded tools is that you hear that, you hear SMB, you think we don't use SMB, even though you are using SMB. It's embedded in things that you have. And you think we don't use SMB. And if you don't really know this stuff, you don't even think about on that level. So it's like Kerberos is another example of that. And I always said Kerberos is a crypto dog.
In defense of the Linux community, SSH version 1, we were like, get that crap out of here. I don't know, but it still took a long time to get rid of it.
But again, I mean, with SSH version 1, that's a good example. If SSH is embedded in something, not just SSH, you're not logging in, it's SSH embedded in another tool that's using SSH, and you think, we don't use SSH, we use tool X. SSH version 1 is embedded in it, you don't even know it exists, you just use the tool, and all of a sudden you get hosed.
My favorite one is that nobody cared about ciphers. Nobody cared about what encryption you were using. They were only cared that you were using SSH until Snowden came out. You know how many freaking people I get asking like, oh, you're saying that I'm using weak ciphers? Yes. Oh, but I'm using SSH version 2. Yes, but you configure it to use triple DES in SHA-1. You need to bring it up. And that's another problem. Problems of misconfiguration. People say it works. Don't touch it. Leave it there. I still see Telnet. The other day, somebody sent me a scan. He works here for a hospital, and he sent me, "Hey Carlos, I have a problem with my Nessus scanner." Okay, send me the Nessus DB. He sends me the Nessus DB. I open it. I go like, dude, why the fuck do you have so many Telnet? I'm seeing Telnet here for so many hosts. Why are you still using that? Oh, dude, those are my switches, my routers. Don't touch them. If I touch them, they're going to break, and I'm going to have a ton of problems. Yeah, and go like, you need to fix that. You need to man up and tighten your belt and fix this.
And we saw that all the time, Carlos, too. And when I was doing audit, we would go audit a company, and you'd see that. And a lot of times the people that you were telling that to, you're saying, this is Telnet. They didn't even know what Telnet was. They were like, what do you mean? And what is that? And it's like, it's this awful in the clear protocol that's sitting there underneath this because it was utilized inside of something. And they're like, I don't know. That's just application X. We use it. We've used it for years. It works fine. It's awesome. But mess with it and everything comes crashing down. And it's so hard to get them to buy into that.
When I started working for the university, I saw Telnet. And so I'm like, fire up a sniffer. I'm going to see what this is all about. Like, what are these systems using it? What is this? And I'm like, it's encrypted. And then I'm like, no, wait. It's just EBSIDIC. Because it was a mainframe. And I thought you'd get a kick out of that. Because you're probably one of the few people left in the industry now.
EBSIDIC.
That know what the hell I'm talking about.
I mean, if you can't use a 7-bit byte, get out of here. It's like, come on. Like, who needs 8 bits when there's 7?
Like, EBSIDIC today might very well be a really good form of encryption.
Well, I mean, it's like...
No, I'm sure Wireshark and whatever has
Yeah, I don't know. I've never even run EBCDIC against Wireshark, but I mean, EBCDIC is definitely something you may see out there, especially if you run into companies. I've seen it in audit because we'd go in audit and we'd see it in logs, and you go, "Oh, what is this?" And again, it's like it's a 7-bit byte.
Telnet. Like,
well, if you're using AS400, if you're using J series IBM, you're using EBCDIC, and that's a 7-bit byte, and that means that people look at it, they don't know what's going on. Security through obscurity, you're going to get hacked. So it's like a very, very problem. And don't assume that people don't know what's going on because it's a 7-bit byte, because it's pretty easy to figure out.
And I feel like SSH today, I remember I did a project 10 plus years ago, where I'm like, managing our routers and switches like you're talking about, Carlos, I'm like, that should be SSH. And I made everyone up, like you said, pull up your britches, tighten your belt. We're going to use SSH. And that was 10 plus years ago. It really is kind of disheartening to me.
But good luck with that. You go to a small enterprise and tell them you got to replace all this stuff, and they're going, that's embedded in this app we developed. It works. Our customers use it. And you say, you got to get rid of this. It's a problem. And they're like, I don't know. CEO says that's going to cost money. I don't think so.
And again, that's the problem with us technologists. We want to change it. We want to fix it. The problem is that we got to think like they do. We got to think operationally. And we got to go, okay, so you want to keep it. You don't have the cost. Let's look at mitigations. Yeah. Many times when you talk with security people and you mention the word mitigations, they go like, no, you got to fix it. And the problem is that doesn't work. We got to also learn to mitigate, and we got to learn to operate inside of their constraints.
I agree. And again, that's what actuarials are going to fix for us. I have a lot of faith in insurance, because actuarials are going to force you to either mitigate that or accept the risk, or they're going to assess what the real cost of that risk is, and they're going to make you fix it or not.
Well, having said that, there is a Cisco router that is being delivered here. I bought one.
Yay!
I'm hoping it has some software on it.
I hope so.
If not, I might be reaching out to some people to figure out.
I swear I never gave iOS to anyone.
Bob has a router coming in. Bob needs some software on that router.
He's going to call Bob, and Bob's going to help us over. Yeah,
help Bob out.
You should have pinged me. I threw out like 800 router models and one 1800 the other day.
No, I bought a 3800 series gigabit Cisco router.
Ooh, sexy.
Yeah. We'll see how
What? For a lab?
No, for production, actually.
You're going to plug your T1 into it?
Yeah. Pretty much.
Your frame relay?
Pretty much. pretty much.
Cloud frame even.
No, it's got dual gigabit Ethernets on it.
Okay.
It's a 38 something.
Well, you plug all kinds of cool stuff in there. 3800.
The reason I mention it is because it's expensive. Cisco's expensive.
Cisco is expensive.
This one was not, actually.
Well, it depends on how you purchase Cisco.
It starts with an E and it ends with a Y.
Yeah, well.
Okay.
He officially called the Cisco rep, and they're delivering that product down there with 5 Cisco engineers assisting.
That's what Bob was advising me to order it from other such nefarious places.
Now I wonder, when a security vulnerability comes up for your version of iOS, how are you going to patch it?
That's true. This is true. I'm going to mitigate that circumstance.
He's going to call Bob, and Bob's going to fix it out
It's called an ACL.
Yeah, there you go. It's an ACL.
Well, I didn't order 2 of them, so I won't be running HSRP. So vulnerability-wise, I should be okay.
But that would be so much fun.
It would be. Yeah. Maybe it will be.
They can redirect your traffic from both of them.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
No, I'm just using. I'm really liking VIOS recently quite a bit.
Yeah.
I'm building my own routers running VIOS, and Ubiquiti happens to run VIOS. I don't know if they have gig interfaces on there.
I don't think they do.
Ubiquiti is normally Linux. They also do run VIOS. I run a lot of. I love Ubiquiti.
They actually did a branch. Their Ubiquiti OS is actually a fork of VIOS, which used to be from Brocade.
Yeah. Okay.
Fork
that
and
used to be Viata.
We have to talk about 2 kind of dirty stories before we go.
Yeah.
One is Russians told to log into PornHub using verified social media accounts. I never realized how detailed the interaction between Russia and PornHub was. Apparently, it was kind of like unfettered at one time. So if you want to post anti-establishment stuff, you could do it in PornHub, and it was somewhat protected. And then apparently this article in the show notes says that Russians at one time were being made to do some kind of identity, or required to log in with their vKontakte social media accounts that are linked to like their government passports and cell phones to get into PornHub. So basically they could track who's logging into PornHub and what they're looking at. And then PornHub was blocked in Russia for allegedly spreading information that would harm children's development. PornHub reacted by offering Russia PornHub Premium account if they'll unban PornHub in Russia. It's really just a bizarre article about Russia and PornHub, if you're interested, in how actually anti-government material made its way to PornHub as a way to disseminate that information.
Yeah,
and you want to give the government what you're actually looking for,
right,
and watching, and they won't use it against you. Not at all.
Never, no.
Not at all.
Governments never do that.
The other, and I don't know if we can play this sound clip or if the guys have it queued up. You should go to nakedsecurity.sophos.com. There's a link in the show notes. There's a radio station local radio station in English Midlands that when the regular programming was knocked offline by pirates using their own transmitter to hijack the station, Mansfield 103.2, I'm assuming this is in the
Mansfield.
UK, played a comedy but decidedly not safe for work song from the late 1970s, which they don't list here in the article. Hold on, I'm going to bring it up here. It's Ivor Biggin and the Red-Nosed Burglars, the Wanker Song.
The Wanker Song.
The Wanker Song. If you haven't listened to this song...
You need to listen to the Wanker Song, yeah.
You need to go listen to the Wanker Song.
Yes,
it's
you
freaking
do.
hilarious.
If you have not listened to the Wanker Song, you need to go listen to the Wanker Song.
We played it in the studio earlier, and everyone was dying laughing. And it's from 1978. But from what I gathered...
Everything good is from 1978.
Or 77. But when they injected this at random times into the radio station, so you're listening to the normal program and all of a sudden you hear the Wanker song. And some people called and complained, and some people called up and were that was hilarious. Where did you guys find that song from? And they're we didn't. We got hacked.
I was really surprised when I read about it because the initial articles were saying that the attacker overpowered their antenna. So it was they had some source that was more powerful than the standard radio antenna, which I thought was pretty odd. We had a pirate radio station pop up here in town a few years back, and the FCC was actually able to use their own equipment to target and find out where they were transmitting from.
Huh.
I guess, in this case, they had done it 7 or 8 times. They still haven't figured out where it's coming from.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Brian said you need to have everybody.
Oh, here we go. Here's the Wanker
song.
I'm a wanker, and I'm always pulling my hood.
That's pretty much the gist of the song, in case you were wondering.
Yeah, that's an Australian song, right?
I'm not sure.
That actually sounded Australian to me.
Could be. Yeah. Could be.
You can inject it too. A lot of radio stations are just web, packet based now, so you can inject. You can do an injection attack on the radio station. We've seen that done on a couple of non-FCC kind of things.
I've not done that, but I have been in the position to be able to do that on a penetration test, where I also had access to social security numbers of the employees or students.
Yeah, we were experimenting with that not too long ago.
Text to speech, I could just read off everyone's social security numbers and broadcast them on the radio station. That's kind of bad.
And I did some experiments with that. What we were doing, we had a web-based radio station that was running off one of my networks, and we were doing some experiments with how we could inject things into that radio stream. I wish I had done the Wanker Song.
No, my attack was not that sophisticated. It was basically like a VNC either exploit or just password guess, and I was on the system that controlled the radio station, and I had the panel, and I'm like, let me change the song. And then I tune into the station, and I'm like, let me change. I'm like, wow, I control the radio station. That's awesome.
That's awesome. Then you have to read a bunch of mysterious numbers out that nobody knows what they mean.
Yes.
Just like 1799995.
And for years, people are to this day are trying to figure out.
There would be conspiracy sites in the next century from that, and people explaining what the numbers actually mean. It's the number of letters that represent the number of hairs in Abraham Lincoln's beard, and how that compares to Adolf Hitler.
Yeah, it was just Paul on a pen test.
But it was just Paul on a pen test reading random numbers into the stream. Entropy, quantum entropy numbers. Yeah, we got enough entropy for everybody here now.
Well, Doug, Carlos, and Don, thank you very much for appearing on this episode of Paul Security Weekly. It was wonderful having you. I had a lot of fun. I wish we could keep going, but we're out of time. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time on Paul Security Weekly. Doug, say over and out.
Okay. Actually, I'm going to say shut down -H now.